Hey, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be discussing the story of the golden calf. This is going to be more like two stories, but we're going to start with the first one. So the most famous story of the golden calf is Exodus 32, right? Moses, he's up on Mount Sinai talking to Yahweh. He comes back, and lo and behold, his brother Aaron, a Levite priest, has decided to build these calves, and now the Israelites are worshiping, right? And Aaron says, oh, these calves? These took you out of Egypt, right? When Moses freed the Israelites in Exodus. And Moses is really mad. He's like, yo, what the heck? These calves did not free us. Did not free you. The God did, right? Yahweh did. The angel of the Lord specifically in scriptures. Angel of the Lord freed you. And so Moses is pretty mad, right? So that's kind of the basic understanding of this event. But this event actually has a lot of spiritual undercurrent to it that is often not talked about. After I explain the spiritual undercurrent, I'm going to explain a way that people incorrectly use this story as an argument against a particular thing. So one of the most important things to remember is that this is not simply just building a calf and building a calf and being like, hey, go ahead and start worshiping this thing, right? When a golden calf is built, this is an induction into a pagan mystery, right? When this golden calf is built, Aaron builds an altar, right? Because they're going to start sacrificing. And then he says, we will have a festival to Yahweh. And he's saying Yahweh as in Yahweh in this golden calf. Then he says, and then the narrator says, the next day the people rose early and sacrificed burnt offerings and presented fellowship offerings. Oh, okay, that's great and all, right? They're sacrificing. Well, what's the issue here, right? This is something that is done throughout the scriptures. They're sacrificing probably animals. Okay, cool. Wait till the next verse. Afterwards, they sat down to eat and drink and got up to indulge in revelry. So, our English translations don't really portray the truth of what's going on here. When the Israelites got up the next morning to have their quote-unquote festival, it was not just eating and drinking. It was an orgy. It was a large sexual orgy that all the Israelites had. And the way we know this is because that's what the scriptures say. English translations do not say this to save face, or I don't know, but it is an orgiastic frenzy. And it's very important that this detail is mentioned because this detail goes into paganism in general throughout the Near East during this period. Paganism was not simply saying, there are more gods than one, and I'm going to worship those gods. No, paganism was an attempt by humans to control divinity, and by doing so, they engaged with demons, and by doing so, they did things like this, because when you're worshiping demons, demons are going to tell you to do demonic things, like have giant public orgies, right? So when Aaron says, yeah, and then the next day we're going to have a big festival, it's not like the festival at Canaan, right? Like in it's like the festival in Canaan, like in John in the Gospels, right? This is a pagan festival, and a pagan festival involves giant public orgies. This is also said in Numbers 25, right? It discusses the ways that pagan worship. But so that's why Moses is so mad. He comes down and he probably catches them mid-orgy, and he's like, "What the heck are you doing? When did Yahweh say to do this?" Right? But the point is that Yahweh did not say to do this, but because Aaron says, this is Yahweh, right? This is Yahweh. And by doing so, he has what tends to be called localized Yahweh. In scholarship about ancient religion, there's kind of this term known as localization, which is sort of understood as different deities or localized to different areas, right? So you have Baal, and then you have like Baal in like certain areas. And certain areas have different names attached to Baal, but it was still believed by the people that worship Baal that it was Baal the whole time. You see the same thing with early stories of Zeus. Zeus is depicted as an animal in some places. Zeus is depicted as sort of the classic like macho guy with his shirt off and abs and an old man's face in some places, right? So this it's still the same deity to the people, right? If you go to a place in the Near East in Canaan and you're saying, hey, I'm worshiping Baal in Ziggurat, right? And they're like, oh, okay, cool, I'm worshiping Baal here. The idea is it's the same deity. So this matters because when we look at the story of Exodus 32, the story is them is Aaron trying to localize Yahweh. He is trying to strip Yahweh away from Yahweh's total control of everything that has ever existed, right? Because Yahweh created the world. And Aaron is saying, no, Yahweh is just like one of these gods, right? This is the meaning of this story. It is a localization of Yahweh. It is a display of the pride of humanity to say, Yahweh, this who freed us out of Egypt through the angel of the Lord, through Jesus, as we know in Jude 5. Jude 5 says this. Through Jesus, who freed us from Egypt, actually it wasn't. It was this calf. It was this localization. And now that we have localized Yahweh, we can use him how we want, because that is the ultimate goal of pagan worship. It is to take control of divinity. Divinity is, in pagan worship, it is not thy will, it is my will, right? So in the Lord's Prayer, we say, thy will be done, right? Because that's the idea, is that we work for God, right? We are shepherds for him, the ultimate shepherd, right? But in pagan worship, it is my will. These localizations, like the one depicted in Exodus 32, is a localization of the God, so that God will be put in our favor, so we can make God do what we want, right? So that's why the golden calf story is so interesting, and why Moses was rightly mad when he came back, because they weren't just randomly sacrificing to just this created calf. It was a supposed localization of Yahweh that Moses just talked to. So Moses is like, yeah, what the heck? I know that isn't Yahweh. I just talked to him, right? So he knows that isn't Yahweh, the golden calf, because he just talked to Yahweh. And he knows that they're trying to localize Yahweh and take away Yahweh's power and use it for their own by doing so. So that's the first story of the golden calf, the most famous one. Now, there's another story of the golden calf that we see again, and it's in 1 Kings 12. In 1 Kings 12, the king of Judah, Jeroboam, basically says, okay, so if you understand the trajectory of kind of the story from Judges to 1 Kings and 2 Kings, it's this kind of more decrepit destruction of the house of David, right? So you have these pretty good kings, right? You got King David, let's go, right? You got Saul, all right, Saul had a lot of problems before King David, but he repented and he's okay. Then you have Solomon. Solomon had a lot of problems, built a lot of pagan temples, but Solomon also repented. Then you got Jeroboam. Really not a good guy. So this is in 1 Kings 12. Jeroboam says, "It is too much for you to go to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, Israel, who brought you out of Egypt." And then he goes and builds golden calves. The same event happens again. And it's not just a random, oh, let's set up these calves because, why not? When Jeroboam does this, it is not only a spiritual attack, it is a political attack as well. Because it's saying, well, not only can I localize Yahweh, not only do I have power over God, it's also saying that, hey, you need to turn to me. You don't need to go to Jerusalem to the temples, right? And to the political leaders and talk to them. You can go to me, right? So then he sets up one in Bethel and the other in Dan. And if you understand the geography of ancient Israel, we can say loosely that term, these are like opposites. So this is sort of a metaphor to say that Jeroboam is trying to establish a localization of Yahweh everywhere. That he's not only saying, I'm just going to set up one golden calf and Yahweh's only here. He's saying, I'm going to set up two golden calves, which means that not only can people in Bethel manipulate Yahweh or believe they can, right? Also people in Dan believe they can manipulate Yahweh. Then it goes on to say the people came to worship the one at Bethel and went as far as Dan to worship the other, right? So it's a very anti Yahweh idea, because he's not only saying, right, oh, we're going to worship other gods, right? He's saying that no, actually, this is Yahweh. We're not just worshiping other gods, because this happens a lot. There's a lot of pagan idolatry where they're building temples for Ashereth and various Moabite deities, and of course Baal and Moloch, right? But this is saying, no, this is Yahweh. This is actually Yahweh that you're worshiping in this golden calf. And that's the radicality of both of these stories, right? Is because it's a localization of, it's a believed localization of Yahweh, right? But as we really know, from what Paul tells us and from what is told us in Psalms and even Deuteronomy, is that these are not truly Yahweh. What these people are talking to, who they are engaging with, are demons. The pagan nations worship demons. And we understand this particularly through Psalm 89, where Yahweh says, you were once gods, now you shall die as men. Now you shall die as men. And the point is not to say like, oh, you were once you were once like divine and now I'm going to make you like humans. It's to say that you will die because I, Yahweh, will destroy you because you have turned away against me and you have sought corruption and chaos in my world, right? And that's the main point, is that these rebellions are not merely rebellions against Yahweh. Say, we're going to go worship other gods. We are believing that we're worshiping you, but we're doing so in a way that involves pagan idolatry, right? So that's the story of Exodus 32 and 1 Kings 12. Now, what is the argument given by some people? Well, you don't see this from educated Protestants, but non-educated Protestants seem to think that venerating icons and venerating just saints in general is worshiping a golden calf, is worshiping golden calves. And as I've explained, worshiping a golden calf is not merely going, oh, thank you, golden calf. It involves these pagan destruction of social norms. It involves the orgies. It involves human sacrifices a lot of the times. The Exodus 32 is pretty vague about if human sacrifices were conducted, but certainly Numbers 25 explains that human sacrifices were conducted at various points in the Moabite people. And so when people use this argument that like venerating icons is worshiping a golden calf, you just have to laugh, because they don't know anything about how pagan worship actually worked. They think pagan worship is just standing in front of something and going, thank you, I thank you, and I place and you know, I'm asking you for guidance and stuff. It's just, this is not how pagan worship worked. Pagan worship involved these social norms being destroyed, because that was the whole point. They were talking to demons, and demons want chaos. And so demons tell them to destroy social norms, like have giant public orgies, like sacrifice children, right? This is what you see in the scriptures. What you don't see in the scriptures is people having freakouts because Job and Samuel are asking for intercession from angels. No one's freaking out about that. That was normal. You talk to the angels talk to Yahweh, and you also talk to Yahweh, right? You can speak both to the angels and speak to Yahweh, right? And that was just considered normal at the time. What wasn't considered normal at the time was doing orgies in service of supposed Yahweh statues, right? Because as said in Acts God does not dwell in a temple. God does not dwell in a temple. God is universal. Wherever we are, wherever you are in the world, whatever you're doing, God is there. There's no such thing as a secular space. Everything is a sacred space. Everything's a sacred space because it's been consecrated by Yahweh, been consecrated by God, consecrated by the God of Israel. That is what should be the takeaway. Is that when we venerate icons as Orthodox Christians and Roman Catholics too, there's not like a fear that you're going to venerate too hard and fall into idolatry, right? It's not like, I'm venerating too hard. I'm talking to Mary too much. I'm going to fall into idolatry. This idea comes from a misunderstanding of what idolatry and pagan worship is, right? You're simply not. If you stand in front of an icon all day and you ask the saints for guidance and you don't even talk to God once that day, you're not going to fall into idolatry. You're not going to talk to demons, right? To talk to demons, you have to engage in these pagan ideas of worship, right? Well, you could engage with demons other ways, but the main entrance for demonic, for worshiping demons is through these pagan ways of worship, right? It's not through icons, right? Especially icons of beautiful scenes from the gospel or beautiful scenes of Jesus and his mother or beautiful scenes of the saints, right? So really dumb argument that only non-educated Protestants make, but it's one you see a lot, especially online when you're in online apologetics and you're talking to people that probably don't read a lot of the Bible, that probably don't have a strong understanding of Scripture, probably don't have a strong grasp of like Near Eastern culture in like the 5th century. So you come up in this argument a lot for Orthodox and Catholics can probably relate to this. You just come up in this argument a lot, and so it's good to address what exactly is the issue with worshiping the golden calf and why icon veneration is simply not worship. It's simply not pagan worship. So I think that's going to do it for this video. We ended on a pretty solid note. I started with explaining these two stories, and then I went into how a really bad argument forms by people that don't know a lot. So, I think that's going to do it for the video. Thank you, and have a nice day.